Hi, I'm Sid Peddinti, the bankruptcy attorney and founder of California Law Services. I welcome you to this web training session. Today we're going to talk about bankruptcy and financial trouble, and to figure out and help you figure out whether or not your financial situation's in the clear or if you're heading towards trouble. And we're going to walk through some of the systems, some of the strategies, and some of the core components of your financial situation, what's around you in your personal life or in your business life, and figure out whether or not they're safe. My name is Sid Peddinti. I'm the founder. I've been a bankruptcy attorney in California for the past 3 years, and I've been a bankruptcy consultant and restructuring strategist in Toronto for the past 10 years. Over the course of my career in bankruptcy law, I've helped thousands of business owners and individuals like you who may have thought, hey, I'm heading towards trouble, or maybe I'm in the clear, but once they do a self-check, realize things are actually worse than they thought. So this process is to help you figure out what financial trouble looks like, who it's for, and if you're in that situation, and what your next steps are, right? How to get out of it, how to become debt free, and how to stay debt free. So let's go ahead and get started. Just to let you know once again, and a few disclaimers, none of the strategies contained today are meant to be legal advice. This is to just give you an opportunity so you can perform a self-check in your financial life. It's so that you get empowered to make the decisions about what you have to do to the next step, whether it's to go for bankruptcy, whether it's to talk to your creditors, or maybe you're in the clear. But this opportunity is meant as a self-check. It's meant so that you get the information and strategies to make an informed decision. It's not legal advice. None of the strategies contained today, and if you reach out to me, we'll construe legal advice. So let's go ahead and look at the number one focus, right? Your total liabilities. So if you have a pen and paper at this point, go ahead and pull it out. If you don't, take a second and pull out a sheet of paper or pull up another screen that you can work out some stuff during the course of this web training session. When you talk about total liabilities, there's a few key areas that we're going to look at. The first one is your total unsecured debt. Second, it's your total secured debt. Next, it's joint debt that you may have with your spouse or a business partner or somebody else. And lastly, it's garnishments, lawsuits, and any potential judgments that you might face in the event any of these debts or liabilities get defaulted. So let's go over here. All right, so we're looking at total unsecured debt. What I want you to do is figure out a rough value of what you think you owe in all your credit cards put together. Right? So I'm talking about store cards, Visa cards, MasterCards, perhaps a business card that has your personal liability attached to it. If you're a solo business owner, chances are the bank made you sign a personal guarantee on it, right? So put down all the amount you owe for your credit cards. Next, let's look into loans, any personal loans or lines of credit that you may have. So write down the total amount that you owe on loans and lines of credit that you've borrowed against. Also, medical bills, if there's any medical outstanding bills that are unsecured against, unsecured, there's no security, unless certain times the medical institution or the doctor may go ahead and put a lien on something. It's highly unlikely. If that did happen, you're way past this assessment point. You are at a point where you need to take action, right? So if you do still owe medical or other related expenses, go ahead and calculate them and write them down. Also, we're going to take a look at any other personal loans that you may have borrowed, cash advances, payday loans, any of those things all go into unsecured, and so put the whole amount down. Okay, so that's your total unsecured liabilities. Next, if you own a property, let's take a look at your total secured liabilities. Now, whether or not these will be affected is a different story. At this point, we're doing a self-check, and we want to have your entire financial picture out there so we can visualize exactly what it is that you have or what you don't have. I apologize about that. So total secured debt, this may be on a property that you own or an investment that you have. It could be a business debt that's secured against your personal assets. Um, does it affect these? Again, like I said, it's too early at this stage to know about it. At this point, we just want you to understand what it is. So again, car leases or financing arrangements go here. And what you want to do here is write down the total amount left on your mortgage, on your loan, on your finance agreement, right? If there's any business or other security that you have, any other properties or investments, then the total amount that you owe on those. Okay, so hopefully by now you've figured out those, what they are. The other thing I want you to do next is to figure out if you have any joint debt. And if you do, go ahead and write who it's with, so a spouse or a partner, and the total amount that you still owe on that credit card or that loan. Not half of it, but the total amount. Okay, so you might have included that up here, for example, in a loan. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Let's go here. You might have included that in a loan payment here. However, if there's a joint holder on that card, on that line of credit or the credit card, I want you to write down that number again. Okay, same number one more time because you are liable as both parties for the full amount. Next, if you have any other lawsuits or garnishments, any of the orders against you, write those things down and what stage it's at, so you can figure out which strategies need to be implemented first, what needs your attention the first, so that you can act in a timely manner. Okay, so total liabilities, lawsuits, etc. So this is your first snapshot. This is an individual snapshot. Hopefully you have a dollar amount by now. What we're looking at here is your total unsecured debt, right? If and your total secured debt, and then we have joint and any other things in the red that have lawsuits associated with it. And so this gives you a good understanding of what it is that you have. So write down the total amount here, right? All these three combined. And then for each individual section, go ahead and write down what those are. So you get a full amount, and then each of those, add them up, and you'll have an amount there as to exactly how much you owe in terms of on your credit report. That's how much you owe. So once we've done that, if you have that figure, write that down, circle it, right? Specifically the unsecured, right, and then the secured, and then we have any joint. And then the next key focus now shifts to your assets. And what we want to do is evaluate the total value of all the assets that you own. Here we're going to talk about personal effects, things like your clothing, jewelry, anything of value like shoes or whatever day-to-day things that you use on a day-to-day basis. These are all things that we want to get an account for. In the event of a liquidation, for example, how much would you get if you sold all the personal day-to-day stuff that you use? Next, we want to understand the valuation of your property if you own a property, right? as well as business property, including contracts or anything of value, intellectual property. You may think that it's unrelated, but you know, it is related, right? What you are your business in a lot of cases, or even if you're in a partnership or you work at a business and you hold shares in the company, they have some value. And into your personal, for example, if they go into your will, it's possible that it could be affected in a bankruptcy. So this is something you want to write down and just get a broad understanding of. Next, your income and expenses, right? On a monthly basis, your net income and your net expenses. And lastly, joint debt versus personal debt, what we already discussed, right? So understanding what's joint and what's personal. So let's go ahead and do those calculations now at this point. So I want you to write down here personal effects plus furniture, right? Anything else that you have that you can liquidate if things go really sour in your life, God forbid, or it does not happen. But if that does happen, what could you liquidate to feed yourself, right? To pay your rent or whatnot. Next, we have your property, real property. Then we have your income and expenses, right? And specifically income rather than expenses. Okay, so these are the three big circles in terms of evaluating your total assets. In terms of your personal effects, again, like I said, write down the number, a reasonable liquidation, let's say garage sale value, right? What you would be able to sell all your personal stuff off for. If you have anything insured, well, put that number down and put a star next to it and say insured, right? Jewelry, and then I said furniture, right? All the furniture that you have in your home, what could you liquidate off? What value it is, right? And next we want to move to real estate. So I'm looking at fair market value here, right? Um, it's not what I sometimes ideally think. You may think you deserve a certain value. I'm sorry about that. But I want you to do some research. Maybe go online. If you have a realtor friend, call him or her up and ask for a basic free valuation. Go online and take a look and see what the market value is. Right. So once you get that fair market value, what you want to do is reduce it by your mortgage that you owe. So what I'm looking for is the equity in your property, right? That figure. 20,000, 100,000, 300,000, whatever it is, right? Now, is it possible that the market price is different from, uh, what's real in there, what's listed? That's okay, right? For now, we just want to get a general idea, not the very specifics. So go ahead and write that value down. You can include any of the property, like investments or um, anything that you own. For example, your car. If you own a car and it's free of any liens, write that value of that car down. If you have any boats or any other 2, 3, 4 cars, hey, write all that stuff down. Motorcycle, write it down. Right? Get a value, come up with a number, and write that number down. Okay, so that's what you're looking for here. A dollar value for all these things combined. And lastly, your income and expenses. If you have only one income in your household, then write that number down. Your net every month. If you're self-employed, then go with an average, right? Go with your last year's income tax statement divided by 12 and come up with a number. Again, we're looking for an average here. And now, if you have any court-ordered expenses like child support or generally child support or anything else that you have some medical condition and you have the medical papers to prove you have that expense without which your life is in critical condition, anything that you really need to live off, right? A dependent perhaps, and so forth. Write those expenses down, right? Something that would be considered exempt as part of your income. So let's, for example, if you have a $3,000 income per month and you're paying $500 in child support, then you can list here in this column here 2,500, and in the child support list the 500, right? So rather than doing that, so that way in terms of mandatory court allowed expenses, you can keep that separate in a separate bucket and get organized as you're walking through this process. So hopefully by now you have a number for each of these sections here, right? Income, expenses, personal effects, furniture, property. Okay, again, if you have business property included here. And so now what we want to do is focus on some of the rules that are applicable and see and examine and help you do a self-check as to where you are, what your financial situation really looks like, and whether or not it's time for you to take an action, affirmative action, towards contacting a bankruptcy attorney, or taking a positive step in that direction to eliminate debt. Okay, so here we're going to analyze the rules that are applicable to your case. Now that you have these different numbers in play, this process might be a little bit easier as you walk through it, right? So number one, what we're going to look at is exceptions. Number two are exemptions. Number three are what are called reviewable transactions. We'll also take a look at assets versus total liabilities, and you've had these numbers down now. And then we'll dive into some of the options that exist for you, okay? So let's before we jump ahead, let's just go back step by step. Now, when we talk about exceptions, exemptions, okay, and then we have reviewable transactions, and we have your assets versus liabilities here. So things that are exceptions in terms of what does not go away if you declare bankruptcy, if you liquidate yourself, if you get into a financial arrangement plan or declare corporate bankruptcy, or even engage in an informal proposal, right? Which is what we don't offer, but if you decide, hey, that's for you, you go for it. Some basic things are not going to be exempt, not part of it, right? These are, again, child support payments. You cannot brush these away. You have to pay them. They will not walk away or go away into bankruptcy. Court-ordered payments. In some cases, right? They don't go away. Some cases they may go away. Here we're looking at also IRS taxes in some particular cases. Now the tax rules are a bit different. It's possible that a portion of the taxes may go away. Sometimes it doesn't. The rules are complicated, so those are things that I will list here for now, but keep in mind they may go away as part of your bankruptcy. You'll have to get an evaluation done separately. Okay. Also, student loans fall into that category. Do they really go under bankruptcy? Do they not? There's many rules on it, and you want to make sure that you get. There's again very specific rules on applicable on how those go away or don't go away. You want to look into that in more detail. Okay, and lastly, again, any secured payments. Look, there's a security against a liability owed. So it's possible they can be separate and they're not part of this agreement, but it is possible that post bankruptcy, let's say, a creditor decides to pull the plug on you and your property's gone, they may not be included in bankruptcy that has already been declared. So things that happen after you file and will go through the process cannot be included, right? Also, any criminal or fraudulent related charges sometimes don't go away, right? Almost always don't go away. So these are all different rules that are very specific. Again, I just talked about very basic ones that are highly specific rules on this topic, including business laws. Especially if you have a business, then it's a whole different ball game. So this is a very area this is an area of law that is very complex, and can have a major impact in the way things work out for you, right, in your life, in your credit history, in your business. So what you want to do right now is just see if any of those exceptions fall for you. Next, we want to look at exemptions. And what I mean by exemptions are things that you might be allowed to keep. Despite having value, the government allows state by state decided, and they allow individuals and business owners to have specific assets considered to be things basic needed for survival, right? Such as, like I said, personal effects, a car, or something else, but cash on hand or whatnot. But there's again limits on each of these. Every state is different. California has very specific rules on it. A lot of it also comes down to the family, how many the number of dependents you have, the amount of income you make. So at this point, just go ahead and write down. I'm not going to dig into the details. You can look up the exact dollar value online on the bankruptcy website, U.S. bankruptcy website. You can get the state by state exemptions, but write that number down because that's what you're allowed to keep, so to speak, right? So once we have those listed, let's go into reviewable transactions and the big one, which is assets versus liabilities. I'm not going to go into reviewable transactions here too much, but know this, that if you've made a transfer of property, if you've sold assets, if you've put something on trust and then decided that at the time you owed debt, right? At the time you were considered technically insolvent, where you could not pay off all your liabilities, what you owe to your creditors with all your assets, right? That's liquidation mode. So if you've done some of those transactions, know that the court can review those and also reverse those ones, right? So if you transfer the property to your son or daughter or your friend a year or 6 months before you decided, hey, I'll go bankrupt, right? I have to go bankrupt. Know that those transactions can be reviewed. Okay, so that's all reviewable transactions means, and you want to keep in mind it's something technically not allowed, right? Again, it's a case on case basis. Assets versus liabilities. Hey, you figured out the two amounts that you have, right? A few screens ago, we figured out the total assets, the total liabilities that you owed. So you have a figure, and now, and now you have the total amount for your total liabilities here. And so write those numbers down, right? What is the total amount of liabilities? So how much do you owe in all? And so here we want to put down unsecured debt unless you have a property that you're looking to get rid of. But if you want to keep your property, let's not include it on the screen. We can go ahead and make a separate column for it and call it secured debt. Okay, so that way it's still in the picture. So we have your unsecured debt here, secured debt, the total assets that you have, and the total income. Okay, your net family income if you have a family, if you have kids, right? Write down the number of kids or dependents, a total household of how many people. So if you're, 3 or 4 or 5, write down that number there and write down the total income, right? And in your income, I want you to also include any expenses that are mandated. So child support payments, court payments, medical payments, right? So write that number down. That goes as part of your overall assessment. So at this point, you should have a good idea of what you owe versus what you own. And if you're in the green where your assets are do far exceed your liabilities, great, right? You may have liabilities 10, 20, 30, $100,000 that you owe, but you may have 3, 4, 500,000 in assets, which is a good thing. You may be able to liquidate some of these assets. Now, if you're not looking to liquidate and you want to still pay off all these cards and loans, well, it's a different story. That's where payment agreements come in, and other options come in. So let's examine that, right? What's next at this point? We're talking about the options here. Number one is a personal bankruptcy. Now, the rules are very complex. There's a lot of different rules come into play based on the income test called the means test. The means test determines based on your income and based on, like I said, what the state and what California has decided what you can keep and what the average person in the United States needs to live per year. They determine an income threshold. If your income falls above that threshold, you may not qualify for bankruptcy. You may be forced into your next option, which is a Chapter 13, a reorganization, excuse me, or a payment plan, right? Where it's sometimes a 3 or a 5 year deal with your creditors, where you're able to pay off all your debts at an agreement, keeping and excluding your personal property, excluding any assets that you have. If you have any business debt or corporate debt, then you have a Chapter 11 corporate bankruptcy option available to you. Now, these are very rare. They don't come around that often, and they involve very complex rules. It's a very complicated game with months and months and months of work involved. So chances are, if you have very little personal, if you're a solo business owner or you have managed a small partnership, chances are you're not going to qualify for Chapter 11 bankruptcies. Okay, so think about the special arrangements as well. This is another option that you have: informal arrangement with your creditors. There's a lot of credit card companies out there. There's a lot of counselors out there. There's a lot of nonprofits out there. Now, I don't want to bash them or badmouth them, but keep in mind, though, those are agreements that are not legally enforceable. And I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but credit counseling firms and these sort of firms in the marketplace are getting busted every single day because of fraudulent behavior. The take payments never paid off. Keep in mind, there's no legal agreement in place. However, if you can negotiate with the creditor directly and pay off something, I would encourage you to do that. It's a negotiation game. A lot of times those things do work out. A lot of times they don't work out. Sometimes a creditor may come back even after they agreed to something, right? There may not be something in writing. It's an informal agreement over the phone. They agree to it. Next thing you know, a year later after paying, you may find a letter. So these things do happen. Whether or not it's infrequent, that's for you to determine. Unfortunately, those are things I don't want to comment on. So again, it's non-legal options like asset liquidation. If you have a property and you have some assets that you can sell off to pay off your debt, absolutely go for it. If it's something that's not really generating revenue for you right now, and if your liabilities are getting excessive, I would suggest to liquidate or stream down or line down and pay off debts right before trying to think about keeping unnecessary assets. So let's talk about qualifications, right? Who qualifies for bankruptcy? How does the process work? Are you a good fit? So the number one thing is your debt amount. If you have debts of 5, 6, 7,000, $10,000, In my opinion, it's not worth going bankrupt, right? You're better off making an arrangement of some of the sort. Now, right, there are people who go bankrupt for 3, 4 thousand bucks. I have filed those papers in the past. It does happen, but it's not very often that it does happen. So you want to be careful and understand whether or not these amounts work. Is it worth it for you or not? Next is your personal assets, the total number that you have, right? You may qualify for bankruptcy, you may not, like I mentioned. Again, you have income requirements. The rules in every state, the rules based on the number of family members you have, the amount of income you make, and other specifications that come into the play. So you can read upon these. They're found all over the internet, and other specific rules regarding business ownership and how you can operate it. Can you continue a business operation after? Can you continue living on the same property? So the rules on bankruptcy liquidation, Chapter 11, Chapter 13, Chapter 7 are extensive. They're all over. You can find them online. I didn't really want to get into the details here. It's more for you to get an overall picture and a snapshot of, the situation, knowing your options. What's good? Is it time for you to talk to somebody or not? So let's focus on the benefits of going bankrupt or liquidating, right? Or making a payment arrangement with your creditors. Why is it a good thing? Number one, there's no interest. Think about that. Every payment that you make is 100% on the principal. Okay, let me go here. Now, if you look at your liabilities, what you owe, you will realize that, and if you look at the bank statements in particular, you will realize that a lot of the unsecured debt, in fact, a major portion of it, goes towards interest, right? Some of it gets funneled to the credit card companies and the banks. Some of it fund the process and go back into investment the bank makes, insurance or whatnot. But it gets funneled out, right? And so take a look at your last credit card statement and figure out how much you paid in interest, right? And then how much you paid in principal. That's the portion that's actually getting paid off. So when you look at this on a month to month basis, so imagine that's month one. And now this is only going to increase, right, on month two by that, whereas now your interest still gets larger. Does that make sense? Every month, your interest gets larger and larger. Right? You still have majority of it being interest. A very small portion of it is being paid off. So it's easy to see how it's very tough to fall into this trap and how to get out of it. I mean, it's very tough, right? Especially if your income is not going to rise anymore, then it's absolutely, how are you going to pay this off, right? If you have no other way of reducing your debt through selling assets, for example, again, you're in trouble. What are you going to do, right? So the benefits of that, and what the government decided, thankfully, was that, hey, let's give people a chance to say no interest. So now you're looking at paying 100% off the principal, right? Plain and simple. That way, you have a shot at getting out, right? Every month you get one step closer. Next, you have legal protection, right? We have it over your assets, personal effects, property, your income, expenses. All these are going to be protected under the plan that's crafted. Okay? The courts enforce it. It controls debt loads because now you have no interest, it's frozen, creditors are mandated to act according to the specific bankruptcy or liquidation codes. right? You have smaller, manageable monthly payments. Now, whether or not it's going to be smaller than your total load, yes, absolutely. With no interest, it will be. But it may still be sizable depending on the total amount of debt that actually have and the total amount of assets and whether or not they balance out, right? So those things are what the consultation stage comes down to. It's always advisable to go ahead and speak to an attorney who discusses these topics so that they can pinpoint exactly what specific rules are applicable. The other benefit is that the payments are absolutely flexible, right? You can pay it off faster in lump sum payments if you have the option of doing so. A big thing again here is that you get no more calls, no more harassment from creditors, no more lawsuits, right? You can go to bed at peace, wake up in peace knowing that, hey, my debt amount is frozen. It's only going to go away. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? It's there, and I'm going to get there, right? So it's a chance to rebuild your credit again. Your assets are completely safe. Your liability is completely reduced. You can get help reestablishing your credit, figuring out and getting a fresh start so that you know how to proceed forward. So that's the uh, self check of this bankruptcy workshop that I've put together. I just wanted to explain one more thing before you leave, and that's sort of how to think of bankruptcy lawyers when you go to talk to them. Um, Remember, there's different parties involved. There's a courts, there's a creditors, there's a trustee who's appointed by the courts to administer the process, right? The administrator, the one who does the reimbursements of the payments and manages how the money goes in. So the money you pay in a payment plan or bankruptcy, for example, goes into a trust account, and that trust account is managed by an independent third party called a trustee by the court, by the creditors who distributes your payment. Now, the trustee gets paid by what they recover, right? And what they're able to distribute to the creditors. So, again, a lot of those times people don't understand where the bankruptcy lawyer fits in. And the position of the attorney, the position that we take as bankruptcy attorneys, is on your side to figure out and help you understand each of these elements and work out the best legal solutions, the strategic moves that help you reduce your liabilities, help you figure out, the best rate, so to speak, the best payment plan arrangement that you can get. My job in this process is to help you out, right? To serve your best interest, to represent you, right? You are our client, not the trustee, not the court, not the creditor. Sure, I have to be informed and educated and respectful of their positions and act according to the law, but ultimately, our duty as bankruptcy attorneys comes back to serving you, right? To help you figure out and deal with all the parties involved, reduce the stress in the process. This is what we do on a day to day basis. I've been doing this for almost 10 years in Toronto first and now in Los Angeles, day in and day out. This is what I've done, right? And what some of my team members have done. So, creditors, court officers, other attorneys. Again, the bottom line is there's just going to be no more debt. So hopefully this has been very informative for you, of high value, help you figure out whether or not where you stand, how you stand. Um, if this made sense for you, what I want to do is I invite you to take the next step. If you think that, hey, this is a position, this was informative, and you want to have a talk about this, I invite you to take a free application form that gives me an understanding of the situation, and I'll give you a free 15-minute phone call, no charge, it's on me, right, to figure out what's your next step. It's a casual conversation, there's no sales pitch involved. I'm not sure if I'm the right attorney for you, or first of all, if you even qualify for a bankruptcy or a restructuring order or a repayment plan, right? So I just want to have a casual conversation, analyze your metrics, analyze your figures, analyze your stats, your finances, right? Figure out the numbers and hopefully point you in the right direction if that makes sense. Okay, so the place to go, you'll find that link on this page, is californialawservices.com/bankruptcy, and you'll find all the details there. Once again, I thank you for joining me here. Hopefully this has been very informative, I welcome you to share this on your social media or through emails to whoever you find would be enriched by this presentation and by this quick workshop. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Sid Peddinti here, checking out California Law Services. Thank you, and hope to talk to you soon. Bye bye.